Journey to Lemora, Chapter 16. The Voice of the Forest. I reset the snare and searched for more mushrooms. I found a small handful, but was delighted to find a bush full of berries. We triple checked the journal to make sure they were edible, but couldn't find them. "What are you doing? We need to begin training," Anya grumbled impatiently. "We're checking if this is poisonous, but it's not in the book," I replied. "Of course they aren't poisonous. Those are tongue dogos. Now eat quickly. We need to get started," he sighed impatiently, pacing around the camp, swishing his tail. "Why didn't we just ask him to begin with?" Nick said, slapping his forehead with his palm. We each ate a handful of berries and a couple of mushrooms. The berries were a little tart, but the burst of flavor was something like blueberries and lemon mixed together. Amber's favorite scone flavor. And we lined up for Anu's instructions. We are in the Faelarian forest territory, the Feywood. They are the masters of wood magic, and I believe it would impress them if you knew some. Each element has its own uses. Fire is a hungry magic which can light your way or destroy your enemy. Water is more forgiving with its healing properties, but wood requires a different skill set. Wood is all about connectivity and becoming grounded. Do this, and you will not only move the forest, but hear the forest's voice as well. You have to attempt to speak to the forest. Unlike fire and water, it is alive. If you befriend the forest, it will bring you many gifts. Betray the forest, and you will feel its wrath. To do this, you must take a wide stance and use your magic to call the forest to you. The words are Ilian Radoras. As he said it, the ground in front of his feet broke, and a root sprouted out of the ground and grew a little orange flower. We each tried our task and found out rather quickly it didn't come easily to any of us. It was completely different from the other two elements we'd learned before. With fire, we infused our magic with heat, burning our magic like fuel. With water magic, we could use existing water to add to our magic. But wood was alive. It had its own being and sense of preservation. It could choose not to come to our call. An hour passed, and then 2. The day wore on, and no one had managed to summon a plant other than Anu, who took a cat nap while we trained. Around midday, we began to grow desperate. "Please, Ilian Radoras! Ilian Radoras! Ilian Radoras!" Amber yelled to the ground on her hands and knees. It would have been funny if I weren't so determined to prove myself. Nick had a different approach. He sat pretzel style in a meditative way, chanting the words softly over and over. He still hadn't managed it, but I thought his way was a little closer to what we were supposed to do. I sat on a patch of grass and closed my eyes and listened. I heard insects buzzing through the air and the trickle of water in the creek nearby. The wood rustled the leaves in the trees overhead, and the branches clicked together gently. I thought of the first part of my nightmare, and then when I became a tree, I was one of so many voices, but I did not scream out to them. I listened. I just had to listen. I felt the grass twitch on my legs and looked down. "Hello," I thought inwardly. "I'm Catty. It's nice to meet you." I held out my palm to the grass, and it gently tickled before the vine grew out of the ground and bloomed into a cute blue flower with rounded petals. I smiled and sat silently admiring my flower, having a nice inward conversation. The others didn't notice for a good while. "Catty, how did you do it? Why didn't you say anything?" Amber demanded, staring enviously at my flower. "Wow, I didn't even hear you say the words," Nick murmured quietly. "It's not about saying things. It's about listening. The trees are speaking right now if you stop to hear," I explained. The wind blew again, but this time harder. The rushing wind rattled the leaves all around, as if the trees believed we would hear them if they just were a little louder. Amber and Nick both sat down calmly and focused. They stopped trying to summon the forest with words. and before long they both had a small flower bloom next to them, too. Anya woke up from his nap with a yawn and sniffed at each of our flowers. "Well done," his voice rang in our minds. "Get to know your blooms, discover their names, and treat them with kindness. This is the beginning of a new friendship." He turned to me and said, "I'm not surprised you managed to speak to them first. You have the spirit key, and using spirit magic already seems to come naturally to you. Spirit magic is the key to wood magic. They pair together, which is why I know Lelian will be able to help you." I replied to Anu for the first time, using my thoughts and not my words, so that the others would not hear. "Have you noticed using magic feels different here? It's weaker and colder. The visions are becoming stranger and erratic. Last night I thought it was just a nightmare." "What happened in this nightmare?" Anu echoed back. "Well, first I became a tree, and then the men from before, the ones who stole the temple, came. They cut all the trees down," I explained. "It isn't over. They're coming here," he growled with a dark look. "We have to contact Lelian and her elder. Keep training, and I will try to get their attention." Then Anu turned on the spot and ran out into the forest. I turned back to my training. Nick and Amber were so absorbed in conversation with their flowers to notice Anu left. "Mine is called Keen. What is yours?" Amber asked excitedly. Her flower was pink with little orange spots. "Mine is Asna," Nick answered, pointing to his own little white bloom with a yellow center. "What's your name?" I asked my flower. "I'm Niha," it replied in a childlike way. "Can you help me, Niha? I need to find someone called Lelian. Do you know her?" I asked politely. "I don't know. Let me ask Mama." "See you soon," Niha called out sweetly. Then it closed its petals in a reverse bloom and disappeared into the ground. We waited. Amber and Nick were unsure of what else to do with their flowers. Nick got some water from the creek for them to drink, and after a while the little blooms each returned home to their mama. The three of us cleaned up the camp and checked the snare and searched for more food. The berry bush was very fruitful, considering I'd almost picked them clean this morning. Even the mushrooms seemed more accessible than before. It grew late in the day, and we started to get worried. An unease settled over the camp, and I couldn't help but feel like something was watching us. We sat together in a circle, waiting as the sun settled in the horizon, the orange light hitting the sides of the trees and sparkling across the creek water. Then I noticed it. "Nick, wasn't that tree over there the one with the weird knot on the side?" I cautioned slowly, pointing at the exact spot where we found our first mushrooms yesterday. Nick stared skeptically at the spot, scratching his shaggy head. It was easy to get turned around, and all the trees looked the same after a while, but I was so sure the tree was in that spot. Amber, who was sitting across from us, had a wide-eyed look, staring right behind us. She didn't move or make a sound. "Amber, what's wrong?" I started to say, when I turned around to find there was a sharp metal arrowhead pointed inches away from my nose. It was knocked to a longbow made of twisting vines and thorns and small purple blossoms. The one holding the longbow was a tall, beautiful, elven-looking woman. She had long, pointed ears, violet, deep-hooded eyes, brown skin which perfectly matched the bark from the trees, and long hair as green as the leaves, which was tied in a braid over her shoulder. She wore thick, bark-like leather armor, soft-soled knee-high boots, and a quiver full of arrows. She could have walked right out of an RPG video game, and we all looked at her dumbstruck. Elves were in my mother's journal, but I still hadn't believed they were real. I thought she added them to her story as a means to appeal to fantasy geeks, but here one was, in the flesh. "Na alahar, katadore felfalas," she spoke in a silky voice, but we just stared blankly at her. I raised my hands to show we meant no harm. and she lowered her bow. "Nahai, Nahai," she insisted, and she beckoned us to follow her. Anya was still nowhere to be seen, but my gut told me to follow her anyway. I nudged the others. We grabbed our things, and they too followed her through the forest. It was nighttime now, and the moons were low in the sky, but they were bright enough to light the way through the trees and bramble bushes. The elf was light on her feet for someone so tall. She was at least a head taller than Nick, who was the biggest in our group. She had a young, attractive face, looking not much older than we are, and I wondered if she was really hundreds of years old, like in the fairy tale stories. I had so many assumptions based on what I knew about elves from Earth stories. I would later realize just how naive I really was.
Hello, my name is Ella, and welcome to my channel. Here I'll be sharing with you my stories, artwork, animations. If you enjoy my content, please support me by clicking the like button, subscribing, sharing, or ringing the bell for notifications. Links to my website and social media are below. I will be releasing content in sequential order, so please check for new chapters each week.